What's up, guys? I am Constant, and this is the complete Shadowlands Mythic Dungeon Guide. You can select the specific dungeon that you're looking for in the progress bar below. And if you find this video helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe, and check me out on Twitch. For Kentara, all players need to make sure they don't stand between the two bosses here, or you'll be hit by a stacking dot. These two share a health pool, so players with dots should apply them to both and cleave whenever they're near each other. Kentara does a frontal cleave, so tanks need to be sure to tank the boss facing away from the group. And avoid the very obvious black projectiles here, and make sure to run away from your group if you get targeted with the charged spear. This fight is very quick and very easy. So this fight is a DPS race that most people just zerg, but the mechanics will be a bit more punishing once you start getting into higher keys. The most important thing here is to do your best to avoid the black projectiles. This is very easy to do at the beginning of the fight, but it becomes more and more difficult throughout the fight as more Shadow Whirls spawn. The boss has a frontal cone attack that needs to be dodged as well. When the boss runs out of energy and casts Recharge, all Shadow Whirls will fire extra projectiles for 10 seconds. The boss needs to die as quickly as possible, as slow DPS can result in enough projectiles that they become impossible to dodge. This is where we use our Shroud Skip when we have a rogue. If we don't, we just have a Kyrian party member grab the spear at the bottom of the stairs and grab both groups on the landing to save some time. So there are a few important mechanics for Oriphion. A slowing debuff will be applied to the tank and melee DPS. Stay spread out for a purifying blast, but be ready to stack for Imperial Ordnance. The goal here is to consolidate bombardments so that you don't end up running out of space, although there is a ton of room around this boss, so it shouldn't be a problem unless you're having serious DPS issues. When the bombardments are coming down, everyone needs to be out of these ordnance zones or you will die. Oriphion will cast Drained and take double damage, and all anima fields from the bombardments will spawn orbs that move toward the boss. These orbs need to be soaked by players, but make sure not to overdo it, as this will give you a debuff and damage the whole party. The fight is really simple. Just make sure your DPS is doing their job. This boss is a bit more involved. Davos will cast Run Through on a target. Everyone needs to get out of the way. We'll also cast Lost Confidence, the debuff with the frowning face. It'll drop a pool on the floor when it is dispelled. If you get this debuff, just try to get to the edge of the room. Move to the glowing blue area for Abyssal Detonation. Get ready for Air Phase. Air Phase happens at 70% and 30%. This phase requires players to run around and get these 5 orbs, then return them to the glowing beacon. Once orbs have been retrieved, have someone in your group hit the boss with the spear. It's best to use the spear immediately after Devo stops moving to avoid missing, and if you do miss, you'll have to gather orbs again. In higher keys, missing a spear will almost guarantee a wipe. Air Phase also has a debuff called Lingering Doubt that stacks on party members and should be dispelled in priority of number of stacks. This will bring the boss down and you'll be back to ground phase. Assuming you didn't use Heroism on Oriphion, I've found that it's best to use it here right after the first air phase ends. The most important part of this fight is making sure that DPS kills the carrion worms. These worms will spawn when the boss casts Heaving Wretch, and if that's cast on you, you should face the boss in a direction where it will not hit the group. Stay out of the green on the ground, kill worms, and that's it. This is a very easy fight and very straightforward, but if DPS does not kill the worms in time, it will just about guarantee a wipe. This is the most useful place to use a Shroud Skip in this dungeon if you have a rogue. Amarth is very straightforward. Ads need to be killed before the boss casts his next final harvest. The group needs to avoid standing in void zones, and everyone needs to dodge Necrotic Breath, which is a rotating frontal AoE that the boss will cast. This is somewhat of a DPS race, as it will become harder for a healer to keep up with each final harvest, though this shouldn't really be an issue until higher keys. The most important thing here, just like the first fight, is that DPS needs to focus down the adds as soon as they come up. This fight seems complicated, but it's easy once you get the hang of it. Range needs to stay close enough to the boss that they can move between the boss and Abomination if they get targeted with Meat Hook. When this happens, you need to get into position and wait until the red arrow solidifies. Once this happens, you will move away and the Abomination will pull the boss down. You then DPS the boss until he goes back up to the stage, and then you repeat that until the boss dies. Don't stand in the green slime, and avoid letting multiple Abominations stack up, as they do decent damage to a tank and can get pretty difficult to deal with. The final boss will cast Frozen Binds on someone in the group. When this is dispelled, everyone inside the ring around them will get Frozen Binds, so everyone needs to get away from the person who gets hit with this as quickly as possible. Comet Storm will bring down icy comets, and your group needs to run preferably in the same direction to avoid crossing paths. You need to stay spread out for the entirety of this fight. When the boss casts Dark Exile, a DPS will be sent below to a gauntlet where they need to avoid some mechanics, reach the non-elite at the end of the hallway, kill it, and then talk to a Kyrian NPC to return to the fight. So we use this skip at the start of Plaguefall. It lets you avoid killing a lot of obnoxious packs, and there's really no downside to it. This boss will cast a Slime Wave Frontal Cone AoE. You need to get out of it and then some, because you can still be hit by this even if you are right outside the graphic. The large slimes that come up need to be either CC'd or killed. We found the Hunter Traps to be great for this, and the smaller slimes need to just be slowed and killed. Kiting the boss is very helpful here, but everyone wants to stay pretty close to the boss so that it's easy to get out of Slime Wave. If any adds reach the boss, they will heal him, so you need to make sure that this does not happen. This is the second major skip that we use in this dungeon, and we found it to be extremely helpful. You have to kill this one mob, but it then allows you to get a nice jump on the next area. So most of this fight falls on the tank having good positioning. DPS is going to need to focus down the Plague Bomb when it spawns or it will explode, which will do a significant amount of damage to the group. The healer needs to make sure to dispel Slime Injection the second it gets cast on the tank, and this means ignoring other dots at times. Dodge the Slime Lunge where the boss jumps up in the air, and you will be good. This fight can be a little tricky to get comfortable with, but once you get it down, it's really just a matter of having the right positioning and killing those slimes as quickly as possible. So everyone needs to be within 6 yards of one another on this fight. Run out right before Shadow Ambush expires if it's cast on you to avoid stunning the group, and have DPS use AoE to expose the Brood Assassins. You can run through them if you prefer, but you're opening yourself up to getting web wrapped that way, and it's much better to use AoE or a flare to expose them. This fight always goes extremely quickly for us, so we have not had any trouble stacking on top of each other, and I don't see it causing any real issues on higher keys. This is one of those fights that should click once you've done it once. You want to dodge the tentacles and make sure you get close to the first tentacle to spawn so that you can jump into that space right after it slams down before the other tentacles slam down. DPS needs to kill adds throughout this fight, though there aren't too many of them to deal with. DPS should also stay out of the green slime in the middle, and only the tank should ever be in that slime, specifically when Malignant spawn is up. This fight has a rhythm to it, and it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. You're probably going to want to have an offensive dispel here on higher keys. Soothe and Trank Shot will also work. Make sure that you don't stand in the spores on the ground. Spectral Transference needs to be dispelled immediately. And that's about it. This is absolutely the easiest fight in here. Very straightforward. And you just need to make sure that you stick to whatever kill order you set. So here you are going to need to kill banners the second they spawn, and make sure to dodge the slam, cleave, and crash from this boss. They will make the ground glow green where they are going to hit, so it's fairly obvious, but you do need to kill the banners or you won't be able to move quickly enough to dodge these mechanics. 2 DPS will be sent down to fight each other, and this is not the time to pop defensive cooldowns. You want to kill or be killed as quickly as possible, and it's generally better to let the higher DPS win, as the winner of this duel gets a 10% damage bonus, while the loser gets a minus 10% damage debuff. So here, anyone who gets draw souls on them needs to get to their soul immediately. Avoid stepping in the grasping hands or you will be rooted. Avoid stepping in grasping hands or you will be rooted, but the hands can also root your soul and make it easier for you to get to it. Aside from that, Phantasmal Parasite needs to be dispelled, and that's about it. This one is pretty easy. This is another fight that is not mechanically difficult, but it generally takes seeing it for yourself to get comfortable with it. Kill ads and avoid the AoE they drop, run out when the boss pulls you in, and find openings on the walls. There will be 2 walls each time, so you're looking for the opening that has another close by on the second wall of hooks. This fight can have some big damage spikes, so healers should be prepared to pop cooldowns when necessary. You're going to need to avoid the rotating frontal attack Dark Devastation here. When the boss casts Manifest Death, you want your group to get close to one another without anyone being in another person's ring. An ad will spawn on each person and they will need to be dealt with quickly, but if you are overlapping too heavily, it will cause serious damage to the group. Echoes of Carnage start at 50%, and this will either fill the platform with ghosts that are fighting each other that will cleave you, or it will summon ghostly chargers around the perimeter that will one-shot you if you stay in their path. Ghostly charge is typically what people have the most trouble with here, so be sure you're watching for it, but it's easy to get overwhelmed here as sometimes multiple mechanics happen at the same time. So just try to prepare yourself for all of the things that will be happening here, and it's not too tough once you've done it a few times. The tank will need to move Halkias throughout this fight so that no one is forced to stand in glass shards. Everyone will need to stay inside this red ring around the boss here the entire fight. And Halkias will emit beams of refracted sunlight in 4 directions during this fight, and the beams will rotate. Players need to make sure not to stand in this. If it's between standing in the glass shards or getting hit by the beams, just stand in the glass shards. This fight is a total breeze, but it's a great time to use Heroism on higher keys. Echelon will stun members of your group periodically with Curse of Stone, and everyone needs to be sure to not stand in Shattering Leap, although sometimes you'll get stunned and Echelon will immediately leap, giving you little or no time to get out. So you'll kill the Undying Stone Fiends together in this if the fight lasts long enough for you to need to execute that mechanic. Don't stand in Blood Torrent, and that's about it. This fight should be pretty quick. DPS needs to interrupt Bolt of Power and Volley of Power here. Don't stand in the Anima Fountain, which is a bright red ground effect. If you get the Haunting Fixation debuff, it means a Ghastly Parishioner is chasing you, so you're going to need to position yourself so that one of these vessels is between you and the ghost. And then you're good. This fight is very straightforward. It only has that one major mechanic, and it's pretty easy to power through. Lord Chamberlain throws statues around throughout this fight, and you need to avoid them, though you can get a pretty good feel for the flow of this after doing the fight a few times. Don't get hit by Unleashed Suffering, and be sure to have your party members soak Ritual of Woe by standing between the boss and the statues when he casts this ability. This fight can go sideways very quickly if people are not soaking Ritual of Woe, so be sure that your party members are familiar with this mechanic before you start the fight. Crixus is another quick one. You need to interrupt Hungering Drain, stay away from the ledge, stack in front of whoever gets Juggernaut Rush, and soak the orbs that spawn on you and move to the boss. If these orbs get to the boss, they will heal him for a significant amount, and you just need to always be sure to position yourself so that you will not get knocked off the ledge during this fight. When Juggernaut Rush goes out, make sure that you are standing right in front of the person that it's targeting, and soak that rush. This fight can feel a little hectic, but it's not too complicated. Tarvald will summon orbs of sin-touched anima that you need to dodge. You can see here that as soon as one passes us, we all move to the side that it was just on, and we repeat that until the fight is over. It's very useful if you're on voice here and you have someone calling this out. DPS needs to focus the adds the second they spawn and make sure that no one is standing in the AoE that's on the ground. It's very obviously bad. It's that black and red that you see behind the boss, and the tank needs to keep moving the boss to get him out of that throughout the fight. Berillia will summon 15 light orbs that decrease the damage that you take from her big AoE. Each orb decreases the damage that you take by 20%, but every person in the group needs these. I've seen a lot of people say, everyone grab at least 3, but you need to grab exactly 3. If you take more than 3 here, you're probably going to get someone killed. Make sure that you don't stand in the yellow swirls here. If you don't have a mobile healer and they have to stop to heal you, to keep you alive, it can very easily lead to their death. But this fight is pretty straightforward, shouldn't be too difficult as long as you follow the mechanics. General Call gets down to 70% from the gauntlet, and you only need to get her to 50%. She will target 2 people with Wicked Rush, and those 2 people need to get away from the rest of the group. Do not stand in the red lasers here, they fire off differently. And stack on the tank with Shining Radiance for Gloom Squall. From there, you're just going to rinse and repeat. This fight can be a little claustrophobic, but as long as your party can avoid getting hit by things, you're going to be just fine. So Streamlabs really hates recording in the other side, so apologies for the choppiness here. For Hakar, we use the strategy where the tank grabs the Suns and DPS and cleaves them down. This requires the tank to move the boss out of the blood dropped by the Suns. Anyone who gets corrupted blood needs to immediately run out of the group, and DPS needs to break through the absorb effect on Blood Barrier and interrupt Blood Barrage. So for Millhouse, you need to make sure that the beam coming from the power crystal is getting soaked by a DPS. Be prepared to swap soakers if this phase is taking a while. The two players who get the red arrow over their heads need to move so that Millhouse is in between them without getting other players hit. Maleficent will then come out and she summons bombs that need to be disarmed as quickly as possible, preferably by ranged DPS or a healer. Whoever gets Shadow Fury needs to position themselves so that the ability hits Maleficent without hitting the tank. This is our Shroud skip. It saves a lot of time, and from what we've seen, this is really the best spot to use it. Dealer's Iexa will periodically spawn displacement traps underneath players, so you want to keep moving. These traps are essentially launch pads that you use to avoid mechanics. If you get the localized explosive contrivance debuff, you need to step on a trap right before it goes off. When the boss casts the general explosive, everyone needs to step on a trap. And make sure that you don't stand in displacement wave. It's the long, narrow, white ground effect. And don't waste traps. Alright, so the final boss will cast 3 types of Master of Death. The green one hits the half of the platform closest to him. The red one hits the left half of the platform, and the purple one hits the right half of the platform. You can see what direction it's going in for those last two based on which arm he raises up. Do not get hit by these. Try to spread out as much as you can for the Cosmic Artifice debuff as well. Take the portals during Shadow Reality and kill the images of the boss, then click on the totem. Return to the boss fight and repeat as many times as necessary. If you send 1 DPS in 3 of the portals and your tank and healer into the 4th, you can end this fight incredibly quickly, and that's what we did here. If you're going to use that strategy, you can actually pop heroism right before you go into the Shadow Reality portals, and it will be a very quick kill. So here the DPS will focus Droman, the tall creature, until they become friendly. Droman will then cause Ingra to take extra damage. DPS swaps to Ingra and does damage until Droman becomes hostile again. Ingra takes reduced damage when Droman is hostile, though sometimes there is a delay between phases on this, as you can see here, which can potentially give you a kill window if Ingra is already very low. You're going to repeat this until the boss is dead. Don't stand in the swirls and avoid the bewildering pollen frontal attack. Prepare to be annoyed. So the tank needs to interrupt Patty Cake. Everyone needs to avoid Dodgeball, which is what these arrows underneath the boss are. Don't go near illusionary Vulpins or you'll be stunned for 8 seconds. Either CC these or have ranged DPS kill them. At 70%, 40%, and 10%, the Mistcaller will summon 4 adds with symbols over their head. Just like in the maze leading to this boss, you pick the one that is the most unique and least like the others and kill that ad, and you'll return to the boss fight. So this is where we used our skip. It worked out pretty well. Saved a minute or two. This fight is really neat. So you're going to spread out here for the entire fight, and each time the boss casts Acid Expulsion, you need to move out of the green swirl. The thing that's interesting here is that the boss will remember how you ran out of the swirl, and then send 2 projectiles the next time, with one of them going to where you ran the last time. This happens on the 3rd cast as well, so make sure that you move differently every time. You're going to need to interrupt all 3 spells that start with Parasitic, and kill the Gormling larva ads, and then just make sure that everyone spreads out for Mind Link so that the spell breaks. Other than that, this fight is just avoiding AoE on the ground. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and check me out on Twitch. And as always, thanks for watching.